I never thought that my graduation day, which should have been the happiest day of my life, would end up being a test of pain, loneliness, and, at the same time, a revelation that would change my relationship with my family forever. That day, I not only received a diploma, I also discovered what place I really occupied in the hearts of those I always believed would support me unconditionally. The story began long before that day. Since I was little, I had witnessed how my family admired Daniel, my cousin who was barely 2 years older than me. He was everything I wasn't. Charismatic where I was shy, popular where I was invisible, and apparently brilliant without effort while I struggled for every grade. I vividly remember the day I decided to go to college. I was 17 years old and had just graduated from high school. While my parents were celebrating that Daniel had gotten a partial scholarship to a private university, I approached the dining table with my own documents. "Mom, Dad," I said with a trembling voice, "I want to go to college too." My father looked up from his newspaper for the first time in weeks. My mother stopped serving dinner and looked at me with an expression between surprise and concern. "Son, you know the economic situation isn't easy," my father murmured, returning his attention to the newspaper. "With Daniel's situation, we're already making a great effort. But Dad, I got a full scholarship at the state university. It wouldn't cost you anything." The silence spread through the kitchen like an oil stain. My mother sighed and put her hand on my shoulder. "Son, that's fine, but don't expect us to help you like we do with Daniel. He's at a prestigious university. He needs more support." That night, in my room, I stared at the ceiling for hours. It wasn't the financial support that hurt me. My scholarship covered everything. It was the difference in tone of voice, the lack of emotion, the absence of pride in their eyes when they talked about my achievements. But I decided it didn't matter. I was going to prove that I could go far on my own. College was a difficult path, but not just for the obvious reasons. I was the first in my family to get this far in studies, at least independently. Daniel counted, of course, but he had all the family support. Daily calls from my grandmother asking how he was. Packages of homemade food my aunt sent him every week, and constant family visits. I lived in a shared room in the student residence. My roommate, Marcus, came from a family that supported him unconditionally. Every Sunday, he received video calls from his parents, siblings, grandparents, and even his dog. Seriously. They put the phone up to the dog so he could see him. I pretended to be busy on those Sundays, but I actually stayed in the library to avoid facing the silence of my phone. The first weeks were especially hard. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, not just from studying, but from an anxiety that gnawed at me inside. I constantly wondered if I had made the right decision, if I really had what it took to stand out in a place where everyone seemed more prepared than me. I remember one October night in my freshman year. It was 3 a.m. and I was in the library, writing a philosophy essay that had taken me days to understand. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but I knew that if I didn't turn in an exceptional paper, my professor would think I didn't belong there. My phone vibrated. For a moment, my heart raced, thinking it might be my family, asking how I was. It was a message from my mother. "Daniel won a debate contest at his university. We are very proud. Have a good night." I dropped my head on my arms and cried for the first time since I had arrived at college. Not from sadness, but from a frustration I didn't know how to process. Why was it so difficult to get a simple, "How are you?" But that night, I also made a decision. If I wasn't going to have my family's emotional support, I would become my own support. I began to work harder, not to impress anyone else, but to prove to myself that I was worth it. During my 4 college years, I developed a routine that kept me focused. I got up at 5 a.m. to study before classes. I worked in the university cafeteria during the afternoons to have extra money. On weekends, when most students went out partying, I stayed in the computer lab working on additional projects. It wasn't an easy life, but it was mine. In my second year, I joined the debate club. Ironically, the same activity for which Daniel received praise at home. The difference was that I had no one to tell about my victories. When I won my first intercollegiate tournament, I called home excitedly. "Mom, I won the regional debate tournament. I'm going to represent the university in nationals." "That's good, son," she responded with a distracted voice. "Listen, did you already know that Daniel is going to graduate with honors?" Your aunt can't stop crying with emotion. I hung up the phone feeling lonelier than ever. But I kept going. In my third year, I got a position as a research assistant with one of the most respected professors in my field. Doctor became something like a mentor to me. He was an older man with a gray beard and eyes that seemed to see beyond words. One day, after a particularly intense work session, I stayed organizing data until late. Doctor approached my desk. "You know, in 30 years of teaching, I've seen many talented students," he said, "but few with your combination of intelligence and determination. Does your family know how exceptional you are?" I remained quiet, not knowing how to answer without sounding pathetic. Some families don't know how to recognize gold until it shines so bright they can't ignore it, he continued. But gold doesn't need to be recognized to be valuable. Those words stayed with me for a long time. Meanwhile, updates about Daniel came constantly. My cousin had become the son that all parents wanted to have. He would graduate with honors from a prestigious private university, had gotten an internship at an important company, and was apparently the perfect boyfriend to a girl from a good family. Every achievement of Daniel's was amplified by the entire family. My grandmother had framed his certificates and had them in her living room. My aunt constantly posted photos of him on social media with captions like "My son, my pride." Even my parents had put a photo of Daniel at high school graduation in our living room next to family photos, as if he were part of our nuclear family. I, meanwhile, remained a footnote. My excellent grades were received with a "That's good, son." My academic awards merited a distracted congratulations when I got my first publication in a student academic journal. The conversation lasted exactly 30 seconds before my mother changed the subject to how handsome Daniel looked in his new LinkedIn photos. The constant comparison began to affect my self-esteem. There were moments when I wondered if I was really doing something significant, or if it was just my imagination. Was it possible that Daniel was objectively better than me at everything? I decided to investigate. One night, when curiosity got the better of my pride, I looked Daniel up online. I checked his public grades, his activities, his real achievements. What I discovered surprised and frustrated me in equal parts. Daniel was a good student, but not exceptional. His grades were solid, but not extraordinary. His extracurricular activities were varied, but not deep. It wasn't that Daniel didn't deserve recognition. It was that I deserved the same level of recognition and simply wasn't getting it. My last year of college was the most intense of all. I was completing my thesis, working as a tutor for first-year students, and had been elected president of the student council. Additionally, I was applying for graduate programs and international scholarships. There were days when I almost fainted from exhaustion. I fed myself mainly on coffee and determination. Marcus, my roommate, constantly worried about me. "Brother, you need to rest," he told me. "Your family would be worried if they saw you like this." If only he knew, I thought. During that time, I only received 2 calls from home. One was my mother asking if I could lend her money from my work savings because some expenses had come up with Daniel. The other was my father telling me he couldn't come to my graduation because he had to work. But that I would surely understand. That second call came 3 weeks before graduation. I sat on my bed, staring at the phone for a long time after hanging up. I felt something break inside me, but I also felt something harden. If they weren't going to be there for me, I would be there for myself. A week later, my mother called again. "Son, you know what? We decided we are going to go to your graduation. Your cousin Daniel also graduates the same day, and since the ceremonies are in the same city, we can go to both." I should have felt happy, but something in her tone indicated that I was still the secondary consideration. "That's good, Mom. I responded with a neutral voice. I'll see you there. The week before graduation was surreal. On one hand, I was receiving recognition and congratulations from professors, classmates, and even students I didn't know knew me. On the other hand, my family seemed more excited about Daniel's graduation than mine. 2 days before the ceremony, I received a call that changed everything. It was Doctor, I need to see you in my office, he said with a voice I couldn't decipher. It's important. When I arrived at his office, 2 other professors were waiting for me. Doctor from the research department and Dr. Kim, the academic dean. Sit down, said Doctor with a mysterious smile. We have news. Dr. Kim spoke first. Your thesis work has been selected not only as the best of your class, but as one of the best in the last 5 years of the university. But that's not all. Doctor continued. We have nominated your work for a national award, and we have news that you have been accepted for a full doctoral scholarship at Oxford. I felt as if the world had stopped. But that's not what we wanted to tell you today, added Doctor. We wanted to tell you that the rector has decided to give you a special recognition during the graduation ceremony. It's something that hasn't been done in decades. I left that office walking on clouds. For the first time in 4 years, I felt that all my effort had been worth it. I called my family to tell them the news. Mom, I have incredible news. I shouted into the phone when she answered. That's good, son. But let me tell you first. Daniel already has a job. An important company offered him a position before graduating. Your grandmother is crying with emotion. Mom, I also have news. I tried again. Yes, tell me later. Your aunt wants to talk to you about how proud we are of Daniel. I hung up without having been able to share my news. That night, I stayed awake, looking at the acceptance letter from Oxford. It was real. Everything was real. And for the first time, I didn't care that my family didn't know yet. I knew my worth, and that was enough. The day finally arrived. I woke up early, not from nerves, but from excitement. I showered, dressed in my best shirt under the gown, and looked at myself in the mirror. The young man looking back at me was no longer the same one who had arrived at college 4 years earlier. This one had confidence in his eyes, character lines earned through effort, and a smile that came from within. I arrived at campus 2 hours before the ceremony. I wanted to walk through the places that had been my home during those years. I passed by the library where I had spent countless nights, by the laboratory where I had done my research, by the cafeteria where I had worked. Each place had memories of struggle, but also of growth. My classmates began to arrive. Marcus found me near the auditorium and gave me a strong hug. Brother, we did it, he shouted with emotion. My family is so excited to finally meet you. They've heard so much about you. I smiled genuinely. Marcus's family had become a kind of adoptive family for me through his stories. They knew about my achievements because Marcus shared them with pride. When I entered the auditorium to prepare, I looked for my family. I found them in the stands, and my heart sank a little. Indeed, they were carrying signs, flowers, and even t-shirts with Daniel's name. It was as if they had come to a sporting event to support their favorite team. My grandmother had tears in her eyes while holding a sign that said, Family Pride. Daniel. My aunt waved a small flag with his name. Even my mother was wearing a t-shirt that said, Proud Mom of Daniel. I stood there, in silence, with the smile frozen on my face. Nobody carried anything with my name. Nobody had prepared a flower, a word, a detail for me. I shrugged, telling myself it didn't matter, that the essential thing was that they were there. But deep down, that family wound began to open again, deeper than ever. Come on, Donnie, we're proud of you. They shouted even before the ceremony began. Their voices echoed throughout the auditorium. Other families looked at them curiously, probably wondering why they were so excited before the event even started. I sat in my assigned place among my classmates. Sarah, who sat next to me, noticed my expression. Are you okay? She whispered. You look a little pale. I'm fine, I lied. Just nerves. But it wasn't nerves. It was the realization that even on my most important day, I was still invisible to my own family. The rector went up to the podium and began his opening speech. He spoke about the future, about dreams, about how this graduating class had extraordinary potential. His words felt directed at me, as if Doctor had told him about my work. The names began to be called alphabetically. Each student went up, received their diploma, posed for photos, and returned to applause from their families. I applauded each name, genuinely happy for each of my classmates. I had shared years of study with many of them. When they called some acquaintances of mine, I even joined in the applause with more enthusiasm, because although they weren't my family, I understood the effort they had put in. I knew the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the doubts they had overcome. Then came the moment my family had been waiting for. "Daniel," announced the presenter. The auditorium shook, not just from people who knew him, but because my family almost rose from their seats to applaud him. My grandmother cried with emotion, as if she were watching her grandson win an Oscar. My aunt waved her flag as if she were at a World Cup final. My father, who rarely showed emotion, stood up and applauded hard. "That's my nephew." My uncle shouted so loudly that several people turned to look. Daniel went up to the stage with a radiant smile. He looked good, I must admit. He greeted the rector, received his diploma, and posed for photos while my family continued shouting as if he were a celebrity. When he returned to his place in the family stands, the celebration continued. My father hugged him tightly. My grandmother kissed both his cheeks, and my mother cried with pride. "You are the pride of this family, Daniel," I heard my grandfather say while giving him a pat on the back so strong it could be heard from where I was. "We knew it. You were always the intelligent one," added my aunt with a voice trembling with emotion. Those words were like knives stabbing directly into my chest. And me? Hadn't I spent 4 years fighting, studying day and night, sacrificing a social life, sacrificing everything for this moment? Didn't my work mean anything? I looked at my sweaty hands and breathed deeply, trying to control the tide of emotions that invaded me. Maybe when they call me, things will change, I thought, trying to maintain hope. Maybe they're waiting for my turn to surprise me. Maybe all this show is for Daniel because they know my moment will be even more special. But in my heart, I already knew the truth. The names continued passing. One by one, my classmates went up to the stage, received their diplomas, and returned with radiant smiles while their families applauded and shouted. The atmosphere was festive, full of love and family pride. When they called Marcus, his family exploded in celebration. His mother cried, his father shouted, "That's my son." And I even think I heard his dog barking through the phone someone had on speaker. I stood up and applauded with all my might for my friend. Sarah was called, and her entire family stood up. I saw her 8-year-old grandmother waving a handkerchief while shouting, "That's my granddaughter," with a voice that belied her age. Each celebration reminded me of what awaited me, or rather, what didn't await me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my turn came. "My full name," announced the presenter with a clear voice. For a second, I felt the air stop. It was my moment. After 4 years of hard work, sleepless nights, sacrifices that no one in my family really knew, it was my moment to shine. I got up from my seat. My legs trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from contained emotion. I walked with firm step toward the stage, with my head held high, although inside my heart beat like a war drum. I climbed the stage steps, feeling the weight of 4 years of effort. I shook hands with the rector, who smiled at me warmly and whispered, "Congratulations, you have achieved it extraordinarily." I received my diploma, the physical symbol of all my work, and posed for the official photo. And then, while I smiled for the camera, I heard it. The silence. The most painful, most deafening, most brutal silence of my entire life. Not one applause, not one shout, not one bravo. Not even a whisper of recognition. My family remained seated, with their hands still on their laps, as if absolutely nothing had happened, as if I were invisible, as if my name hadn't been called, as if for years of my life meant nothing. The contrast was devastating. Minutes before, those same people had been shouting, crying, celebrating Daniel as if he had cured cancer. For me, nothing. Absolute silence. I looked directly toward where they were sitting. My mother avoided my gaze. My father seemed to be checking his phone. My grandmother looked elsewhere as if something else had caught her attention. My uncles and aunts conversed among themselves in whispers. I looked toward the rest of the audience. I saw other families who didn't know me applauding timidly, perhaps feeling uncomfortable noticing the evident loneliness of my moment. Some of my classmates applauded from their seats. Marcus shouted, "That's how it's done, brother," from his place. But from mine, from my own blood, nothing. Total silence. I returned to my seat with moist eyes, fighting to maintain composure. Each step back felt like an eternity. Tears threatened to betray me, but I refused to cry in front of everyone. I sat down and put the diploma on my lap, looking at it as if it were a strange object. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She had seen everything. After the ceremony, we headed to the restaurant my family had reserved to celebrate. When I arrived, I realized that the entire reservation had been made thinking of Daniel. The table was decorated with blue and gold balloons that said "Congratulations, Daniel" in bright letters. There was a special cake with his name written in elegant frosting, gifts wrapped in festive paper piled in a corner, and even personalized napkins with Daniel's graduation 2024 printed on them. I sat in the chair that was available, with my diploma still in my hands, feeling like an unwelcome guest at my own graduation celebration. The waiters began to serve, and my family immediately began with impromptu speeches. My uncle stood up with his champagne glass. "I want to make a toast for Daniel," he began with an emotional voice. Since he was a child, we knew this boy was going to go far. His intelligence, his charisma, his dedication, everything about him screamed success. Everyone raised their glasses and nodded in approval. My aunt continued, "Daniel was always special. I remember when he was 10 years old and already spoke like an adult. His mother always said he was going to be someone important, and she was right." My grandmother, with tears in her eyes, added, "He is the pride of this family. Seeing how he has grown, how he has matured, how he has achieved all this, it's a dream come true." Then my father stood up, and my heart accelerated for a moment, thinking he would finally include me in the celebrations. "Daniel was always special," he said, raising his glass with a genuine smile I rarely saw from him. "This diploma is just the beginning of all the great things that await him. We are sure he is going to conquer the world." "Yes," added my mother with a radiant smile. "Daniel is the true example for all the young people in the family. He is intelligent, hardworking, charismatic. He has everything needed to succeed in life." I remained seated in silence, with my diploma leaning against the wall next to my chair, as if it were a forgotten object. Nobody mentioned my name. Nobody recognized that I had also graduated that same day. It was as if I were a ghost. The conversation flowed throughout dinner around Daniel, his future plans, his new job, his girlfriend, his university achievements. I listened to stories I had heard before, anecdotes that were repeated as if they were new, and projections about his bright future. I ate in silence, feeling how each word was a small stab. It wasn't that I was jealous of Daniel's success. He had worked hard too and deserved recognition. But it deeply hurt to be completely ignored on what should have also been my special day. Finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, when the weight of silence and invisibility became unbearable, I decided to speak. My voice came out, broken but audible. "And me? Aren't you proud of me too?" The question cut through the conversation like a knife. Suddenly, the entire table fell into complete silence. Forks stopped moving. Glasses stopped halfway to mouths, and all eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to discomfort. Some looked down at their plates as if they had found something fascinating in the food. Others pretended not to have heard and began playing with their napkins. The air thickened with palpable tension. My mother looked at me with an expression I couldn't completely decipher, a mixture of surprise and something that could have been guilt. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. After what felt like an eternity of uncomfortable silence, my uncle finally murmured without looking up from his plate. "Of course we are, but Daniel's situation is different." That word, different, hung in the air like a sentence. Different. Not better, not worse, simply different. But in the context of the entire celebration. Of all the shouts and tears for Daniel versus the absolute silence for me, different felt like a euphemism for less important. That word was engraved in my mind and heart like liquid fire. Different, as if my effort were from a completely different category. Inferior, less worthy of recognition. I looked around the table, hoping someone else would say something. That someone would correct that word, that someone would defend me. But nobody did. Everyone continued avoiding my gaze, focusing on their plates, as if they were the most interesting things in the world. In that moment, I understood that it wasn't about an oversight or nerves about the event. It was a conscious choice. My family had chosen their favorite a long time ago, and I simply wasn't him. The night seemed doomed to end in total humiliation. I was mentally preparing to leave early, invent some excuse about being tired after the ceremony, and simply disappear from this celebration that clearly wasn't for me. But then, when they were serving dessert, a special cake with "Congratulations, Daniel" written in blue frosting, something happened that nobody expected, especially me. The university rector entered the restaurant. At first I thought maybe he had come to dine with his own family, or that it was a coincidence. But he was accompanied by Dr. and Dr. Az, and all three were heading directly toward our table with serious but kind expressions. "Excuse the interruption," said the rector with a firm but kind voice, addressing the entire table. "I am Dr. University Rector. We have come because there is a special recognition that, by protocol, we couldn't announce during the main ceremony." Everyone at the table looked at him with absolute curiosity. My family straightened in their chairs, probably thinking they were coming with some additional recognition for Daniel. I sank a little more in my seat, expecting to witness another celebration that didn't include me. The rector took out a golden official envelope with the university seal and continued solemnly. This year, among the hundreds of students who graduated, one stood out exceptionally. Not only for their perfect grades, but for their innovative research, their silent leadership, their ability to inspire other students, and their extraordinary resilience in the face of challenges. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. Even neighboring tables had stopped conversing to listen. This distinction is awarded once every several years, only when we find a truly exceptional student. This special recognition of academic excellence and student leadership is for ... My heart stopped. I looked down, convinced that once again I would hear Daniel's name. I mentally prepared my forced smile to applaud my cousin again. My full name. The world stopped completely. I raised my head so quickly I almost hurt my neck. Had I heard correctly? Had he really said my name? The rector approached me directly, with the golden envelope in his hand and a genuine smile on his face. "Congratulations! Your research work on urban sustainability has been not only selected as the best of your class, but will be published in our main academic journal and has been nominated for a national award." My hands trembled as I received the envelope. Inside was an official letter with the university letterhead, and when I began to read it, the words blurred from the tears forming in my eyes. Doctor approached and put his hand on my shoulder. "But that's not all. Your research has attracted international attention. You have been selected for a full doctoral scholarship at Oxford University. All expenses paid for 3 years," Doctor added. "Additionally, 3 American universities have expressed interest in your work. You have options that very few students receive in their entire academic career." The entire restaurant exploded in applause. People from other tables stood up. Waiters stopped serving to applaud, and even the chef came out of the kitchen smiling. My university classmates, who happened to be at other tables in the same restaurant, began shouting, "That's how it's done, and you deserved it." But my family was an absolute shock. I saw expressions of surprise, confusion, and something I couldn't completely identify on their faces. My uncles and aunts exchanged looks of disbelief. My cousin Daniel frowned as if he couldn't process what he was hearing. My parents seemed petrified, as if they were seeing a stranger instead of their own son. My grandmother had her mouth open, looking at me as if she were seeing me for the first time in her life. The rector continued, raising his voice so the entire table could hear clearly. His silent effort, his unwavering dedication, and his academic brilliance are a perfect example that true value and excellence don't always make noise. Sometimes, the most extraordinary people work in silence, building a bright future with determination and humility. He paused, looking directly at my family. But sooner or later, excellence always finds its way to the light. And when it does, it shines so bright it's impossible to ignore. I was trembling completely, with tears running down my cheeks uncontrollably. For the first time in 4 years, for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely seen, recognized, validated for who I really was and what I had really achieved. Doctor addressed my family. I hope you understand that you have a truly exceptional person in your family. In my 30 years in academia, I have seen very few students with this combination of intelligence, hard work, and character. My mother finally reacted. She tried to get up from her chair with a forced smile, beginning to applaud timidly. Yes, we always knew our son was special. She lied with a voice that sounded hollow even to her. My father also stood up, trying to join in the applause. But the contrast between his previous indifference and sudden enthusiasm was so obvious it was almost comical. "Of course, we are very proud," added my aunt, but her voice sounded forced and unconvincing. My grandparents remained seated, still processing the information. My grandmother looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, as if she were completely reevaluating who I was. But it was too late. The contrast was too evident, too painful, too revealing. When the rector and professors left, after more congratulations and explanations about the next steps for my scholarship, the table was left in an uncomfortable silence very different from before. This time, it was my family who didn't know what to say. Daniel was the first to break the silence. "Congratulations, cousin. I didn't know that you were doing all that." His voice sounded genuine, but also confused, as if he really couldn't believe that his invisible cousin had achieved something so significant. My uncle cleared his throat. "Yes, congratulations. It's impressive. Why hadn't you told us about all this?" The question hit me like a slap. Why hadn't I told them? Were they seriously asking that? I looked around the table at all these people who had been my family my entire life. And for the first time, I clearly saw the dynamic that had defined our relationships for years. "I did tell you," I said, with a calm but firm voice. "I told you about my perfect grades every semester. I told you when I won the regional debate contest. I told you when they published my first article. I told you when they elected me president of the student council. I told you about my research." My voice grew stronger with each word. The difference is that you never listened. Because for you, I was never interesting enough to pay attention to. My mother tried to interrupt. "Son, that's not true. We always..." "Mom," I interrupted her, and my voice had an authority I had never used with her before. "Today, at my graduation, when they mentioned my name, you remained in absolute silence. When they mentioned Daniel's name, you almost stood on your chairs to applaud." The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the silence of people who had been confronted with an uncomfortable truth they couldn't deny. My grandmother finally spoke with a small voice. "Son, we didn't know." "Grandma," I said, with gentleness but firmness, "you knew exactly what you were doing." For 4 years, every achievement of mine was minimized. Every success was overshadowed by anything Daniel did. It's not that you didn't know, it's that you chose not to know. My father, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "Son, maybe we didn't express our pride in the right way, but Dad," I interrupted him, "it's not about the right way. It's about the fact that you never expressed pride. Period." I took the golden envelope from the table and stood up. For years, I wondered what was wrong with me. Why I wasn't enough for you. Why Daniel was always more important, more interesting, more worthy of your love and attention. I looked at each of them. Today, I finally understood that there was nothing wrong with me. The problem was never me. My aunt tried one last time, but son, we're family. We've always loved you. ... Aunt, I said with a sad smile. Loving isn't enough. I also love Daniel, and I'm genuinely happy for his successes. But loving someone means seeing them, celebrating them, supporting them. It means being present in their important moments. I looked toward Daniel. And Daniel, you also have part of the responsibility in this. You knew perfectly well that I was being ignored, and you never said anything. You never asked about my achievements, never tried to include me in family conversations about academic success. Daniel looked down, clearly uncomfortable. I continued, I don't need signs or balloons. I never needed them. The only thing I needed was for you to see me as the son, grandson, nephew who was also fighting to do something meaningful with his life. My mother had tears in her eyes. Son, we can change. We can... Mom, I said with a gentle but firm voice. Maybe you can. I hope you can. But I no longer need your validation to know who I am or what I'm worth. I took my diploma and the Oxford letter. I'm going to leave now. I have a new life waiting for me across the ocean, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. I headed toward the exit, but stopped at the door and turned around. If someday you really want to know the person I've become, I'll be willing to listen, but it will be on my terms, not yours. And with those words, I left the restaurant and that family dynamic forever. The following months were transformative. I prepared for my trip to Oxford, sold my few belongings, and said goodbye to the friends who had truly been family to me during those 4 college years. Marcus and his family organized a small farewell for me. That was more emotional and meaningful than any celebration my biological family had ever given me. His mother hugged me and said, "You were always part of our family through Marcus. We are proud of you." Doctor wrote me a recommendation letter so moving that when I read it, I cried for an hour. In it, he wrote, "In 30 years of academic career, I have seen many brilliant students, but few with the unique combination of intelligence, perseverance, and humility of my name. His ability to excel without fanfare, to lead without ego, and to maintain his integrity under pressure is truly exceptional." During those months of preparation, my family tried to reach out several times. My mother called me weekly. My grandmother sent me letters. And even Daniel wrote me a long message asking for forgiveness and explaining that he hadn't realized the situation. But I had changed. I was no longer the young man desperate for approval I had been for years. I had found my own voice, my own worth, my own direction. I didn't respond with anger or resentment. I simply responded with honesty. I appreciate that you've realized, but I need time and space to build my new life. Oxford was everything I had dreamed of and more. They received me not just as an international student, but as someone who had demonstrated exceptional academic excellence. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where my hard work, intelligence, and dedication were not only recognized, but celebrated. My professors knew me by name. My study companions respected me for my ideas, and I found myself flourishing in ways I had never imagined possible. During my first year at Oxford, I published 2 articles in international academic journals. My research on urban sustainability was presented at conferences in Paris, Berlin, and Tokyo. I learned 3 additional languages and collaborated with students from around the world. For the first time in my life, I was in a place where my value was evident to everyone, including myself. As my successes became more public, my articles were shared on academic social media. My conferences appeared on YouTube. Universities began contacting me for future opportunities. My family intensified their attempts to reconnect. My mother sent me a long email telling me she had framed all my published articles and put them in the living room. Next to Daniel's photos. "We were always proud," she wrote. "We just didn't know how to show it." My grandmother wrote me a handwritten letter with her trembling handwriting, saying she had been bragging about my achievements to all her friends at the knitting club. "Now they all know I have a grandson at Oxford," she wrote. Even my uncle, who had been one of the most indifferent, sent me a video telling me he had seen my conference on YouTube about sustainable urban development. "I didn't understand half of it," he admitted, "but it looked very impressive. We are proud of you." But the words that impacted me most came from Daniel. He wrote me a message that was different from all the others. "Cousin, I've been reflecting a lot about what happened at your graduation and in the previous years. I can't change the past, but I can admit the truth. I always knew you were smarter than me, harder working than me, more determined than me. I think that's why I never said anything when the family ignored you. Deep down, I was afraid that if they really saw you, they would realize that you were the one who really deserved all that attention I was receiving. It was cowardly of me, and I'm sorry." During my second year at Oxford, I decided I was ready to have some difficult but necessary conversations with my family. Not because I needed them, but because I had reached a place of peace from where I could freely choose my relationships. I scheduled a family video call during winter break. When everyone appeared on screen, my parents, my grandparents, my uncles and aunts. Even Daniel, I could immediately see that something had changed in the family dynamic. My mother spoke first. "Son, we've been doing family therapy. We wanted to understand how we came to hurt you so much without realizing it." My father, who had never been good with emotions, had tears in his eyes. "We were so used to seeing Daniel as the successful one in the family that we became blind to your own achievements. It's no excuse, but it's the truth." My grandmother, with her characteristic honesty, said, "Son, I always favored Daniel because he reminded me of his grandfather, my husband. But that wasn't fair to you. You were more like me, hardworking, quiet, determined. I should have valued those qualities." The conversations were long, sometimes painful, but also healing. Not everything was resolved immediately. Some wounds take years to heal completely, but a new foundation was established for our relationships. 3 years later, when I completed my doctorate with highest honors and received job offers from prestigious universities on 3 continents, I decided to return home for a visit before making my next career decision. The reception was completely different from that graduation. My family organized a genuine celebration not to compensate for the past, but to genuinely celebrate who I had become. This time, the signs had my name. This time, the shouts and applause were for me. This time, the tears of pride were for my achievements. But most importantly, I no longer needed them. I had learned to celebrate myself, to recognize my own worth, to build my own support network with people who saw and valued me from the beginning. The celebration was beautiful, but what really mattered was the peace I felt within myself. Daniel approached me during the party. "Do you know what I admire most about you now?" "What?" Kia asked with curiosity. "That you never became bitter. That when you had the opportunity to reject us completely, you chose to give space for growth. That requires a strength I'm not sure I have." I smiled. It wasn't strength, Daniel. It was freedom. When I finally understood that my worth didn't depend on their approval, I could freely choose whether I wanted to maintain these relationships or not. And I chose to try, but on my own terms. Today, 5 years after that graduation that changed everything, I can say that the wound truly became my engine. I have a successful academic career. I have traveled the world. I have contributed to research that is changing urban policies in several countries. and I have built personal and professional relationships based on mutual respect and genuine recognition. My relationship with my family has improved significantly. It's not perfect, some dynamics take generations to change completely, but it's honest, respectful, and based on who we really are, not on favorites or comparisons. Daniel and I have developed a genuine friendship. He has done his own personal growth work, and now we can celebrate each other's successes without competition or jealousy. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about my family, but about myself. True value doesn't depend on others' applause. Your worth isn't measured by who celebrates you, but by the integrity with which you live your life, the effort you put into your dreams, and the compassion you show toward yourself and others. That day, at my graduation, my family applauded Daniel with all their might, but remained silent when my name was called. That silence was painful, but it was also liberating. It taught me that I don't need external validation to know who I am. And when the rector came to recognize my achievements in front of everyone, the whole world knew something I had taken years to learn. That sometimes the strongest people are those who shine in silence, building their own path without fanfare, until their light becomes so bright it's impossible to ignore. If you have ever felt invisible at your own celebration, remember this: your value doesn't depend on who applauds you when you go up on stage. Your value is in the courage you had to go up on stage in the first place, in the work you put in to get there, and in the strength you developed in the process. The silence hurts, but it also teaches. And although my family didn't applaud that day, the world gave me the validation I needed to understand a fundamental truth. You are enough, exactly as you are, with or without others' applause. That day, I understood that silence hurts, but it also teaches. And although my family didn't applaud, the world gave me the validation I needed. Subscribe for more stories like this and share if you ever felt ignored. Remember, your value doesn't depend on who applauds you, but on who you are when nobody does.